Alan Moraine. As you know, Alan Moraine.
As you know, this is Measure an Episode. Measure of an Episode, not Measure
The
an
measure
Episode.
of an episode.
It's whatever I say it is.
It's the measure of an episode.
I feel like we can't celebrate it every episode.
I think we should.
Like, meh, meh, meh.
With-
You know, you
yeah.
can't do that every...
Well, and a timpani drum roll.
Like, and the winner is, the Oscar goes to...
So when did it switch to a timpani? I mean, I know you're still doing the intro, but like why is there a timpani versus a snare drum? Like the timpani is for...
I think because it would be difficult to hear if you had a snare drum going, because that's high pitched, and the timpani is low rumble.
Right, that's true.
And it has a nice bang, boom. You can get
Spot
people's
on.
attention without blowing out the speakers.
Right. Well, and also it does have that resonance that you just did, as opposed to the snare drum where if you're like trying to get somebody's attention, you just hit it once, you're like,
Quiet!
right.
Yeah.
Anyway, what do we do here?
Where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a genuine Star Trek episode, and not just... I'm Paul.
Yeah, it's pretty... yep. And I'm Jonathan. And we do this using 3 criteria. The first one is, within the plot, is there something that is science fictionally based? And is that science fiction... Sorry, the second one is that science fiction presented in a novel or unique way? And the third one is there a moral or ethical dilemma that a character is facing? I mean, for us, it's not necessarily that it has to be resolved. It's just, are they making a decision? Because I feel like there are some episodes where they have an ethical, and a choice is made, but it's still not necessarily the right or wrong one. It's just they had to make a choice.
Yeah. I mean, any moral dilemma.
Yeah. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Paul. And this week we watched Deep Space Nine? Deep Space Nine.
It's a weird name of an episode.
Oh, I didn't write down it was season 1, episode 9?
Sounds right?
That sounds right. Doesn't matter.
Season 1 for sure. Oh, no, it's on the back end.
And this blurb is excellent. Once again, proving that whoever writes these blurbs...
It's not on the back end. Sorry, it's episode 10.
Is it? Okay.
That's strange. Okay.
Whoever writes these blurbs does not watch the episode, only watches the cold open. Because if we were to read the blurb, as I will do right now, Commander Sisko, in dress uniform, why not in dress uniform, Commander Sisko prepares to receive the first formal alien delegation from the Gamma Quadrant.
Right.
So why? Number one, poorly written blurb. Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is a V1. This is draft 1, mm-hmm. First draft blurb. Number 2, I guess it is true in the intro, in the cold open.
Right.
But this is not what the episode is about.
Not at all. Well, can you imagine if that was what the episode was about?
Well, I was going to say it'd be terribly boring, but then I'd be like, well, that's on par. That's not fun par, it's on par. Stupid.
Well, and it's
joke.
pon far.
But that's what I said.
Oh, I thought you said fon par.
I did say that.
You're right. You're right.
And you're right. When you're right, you're right. First of all, not what the episode is about. Second of all, why? Like, did they just start writing? It was like, oh, he's in dress uniform. I should put that in somewhere. I don't want to backspace all the way to the beginning.
It's all the way over there.
So I'll just put that right here.
Well, yeah. Was he in dress code at the very opening shot? Or...
The whole opening scene is him admiring himself in the mirror.
That's right. Yeah. So I wonder if, like, he's kind of writing it as it's going. So, the scene starts with Commander Sisko, and he's like, oh, Commander Sisko. And then it pans out a little bit, and he's like, in dress uniform. Like, oh, excuse me.
He's got, like, the text version of a soundboard. He has a picture of Sisko. It's like, oh, I'll push that button. It puts in Commander Sisko in the text. It's funny that you recognize this so early on, because it is so true.
Right.
I wonder if anybody else notices this. I think you have to be a smart person to recognize this, because, first of all, who reads the blurbs?
Right. Yeah, there's definitely that.
Well, okay, so if we could just get into the episode real quick. So what you just said is it's true for all of Deep Space Nine. Because, of course, they start out this episode in the way that I hate, which is we have to have a banal conversation. We can't just get into the action. So this starts out with Sisko admiring himself in the mirror. Jake comes in, and instead of getting right to the action, where Jake comes in and says, hey, what are you dressed up for? Well, and then Sisko tells him about the delegation that's coming.
The stuff we're about to find out, yeah.
Right. That's the intro. As opposed to Jake sitting down and be like, yeah, I talked about girls. And Sisko's like, what do you mean you talked about girls? We have to have a conversation about women. And then he's like, who are you talking to about girls? And he says, and they have this whole, like, I'm already boring myself trying to recount it in an interesting way.
Right.
It's like, why not just cut it? Because it never comes back.
Right.
It's not like yes, it comes back where Jake talks to Odo, but not in any material way.
Right. No.
That's just something fun for Odo to say. It's just, why does it have to be a 2-minute scene? Why can't it be a 30-second scene so we can get into the episode?
It's nice that they actually did bring it back because that hardly ever happens on DS9 and Voyager. Like, that opening conversation is never brought up again.
Yeah.
But the fact that they did bring it up again, it would have been nice if there had been some resolution, kind of along the same lines as the episode with Odo and Quark. Quark having the pieces of that one person that they were selling off.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he finds out that that person is still alive. And so Quark actually, you know, he's like, you need to, I've been swindled and you need to catch the guy. Like, the fact that they bring it up again, they reference the opening conversation, and then that's the end of it. I feel like that's probably the part where I get the most frustrated. Like, if you're going to leave it in the cold open, then just have that be the conversation. That's the end of it. If you're going to bring it up again in the later episode, later on in the episode, like, let there be some resolution to it.
And maybe that gets cut out half the time, and that's why it's so frustrating. Because they have to make time.
Right.
But that
seems
part of the
silly. So there's no point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they're not off to a great start.
Nope.
For this episode.
Clearly, since we're already talking about what's wrong with it.
Let's spend 5 more minutes on how the opening sucked. So they get to the Hawadi, who is this new race. And I got to say, I loved the main actor, this guy. Mm-hmm. Sort of reminiscent of Mandy Patinkin. I actually thought it was him, but it's not.
Oh, yeah. I can see. Yeah.
Yeah. I just enjoyed the way he played this guy. I felt like that happens a lot where they have these day player one-off actors who come in, they really knock out of the park. Kind of like the same guy in Alice.
Right.
The traitor in Alice. He was great.
Yeah, John Fleck. Yeah.
Yeah. I was hoping he was going to be the same actor.
That would have been fun.
But, okay, so it's established that the Hawadi want to play games. They immediately come on the space station and say, we want to play some games. Where are your games? And I like this little bit, albeit glib, kind of science fiction-y race stuff, where it's, okay, we have a race that is heavily dependent upon playing games. All their culture is surrounding games.
Right.
I was like, oh, this might be interesting. And so then they take him to Quark's and they play a little bit of whatever their gambling thing, Baccarat. Mm-hmm. Bert Baccarat.
Right, yeah.
There's this negotiation between Quark and the main guy of what do they both value so they can exchange. Mm-hmm. You know, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. They didn't really emphasize it very much, but this was the most interesting part of the whole episode for me.
Kind of, but what was interesting to me about it was he was presenting things that were terrible, and then he's like, well, I guess we have these rocks, and he brings out these diamonds. And so the way I interpreted that as a society of gaming, like, it seemed like he was genuinely trying to provide some immaterial things to an alien species to see how gullible they are.
I mean, they could have been burying the lead a little bit, but I would think, though, that if those, let's say those gems, those precious gems that the Hawadi laid on the table, it's like, well, I guess we have these.
Right.
That would indicate they don't value them.
Right.
And Quark should have picked up on that, because you want somebody to bet something that they value. That's the fun part. Mm-hmm. So if they don't value these precious gems that Quark does, then there's an imbalance and it won't work.
Right.
So that doesn't, I mean, they never indicated that they valued them that much. They just had this drink they said was priceless. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what it tasted like. You know.
Well, I love that phrasing. What one sees as priceless, the other sees as worthless.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the whole point of the scene. I actually really enjoyed the scene because it's a great demonstration of how certain people can value things and other people don't. But then it goes a step further and like, oh, we can't deal. We cannot communicate, because that's sort of the language of Ferengi, and in this case Quark, that we have no way of communication because we can't find something on equal bounds that we value.
Right.
They didn't really explore it very much. It's not really science fiction, but it was interesting to me. They set up at the end of this day when, before Quark cheats and makes the Hawati mad, Sisko comes home and laments to Jake that I've spent the last 6 hours watching people play childish games.
Right.
And that's sort of a theme in this episode, strangely. There's kind of this theme of Sisko's better than everything. He's better than Nog about talking to Jake about women. He's better than watching these people gamble, even though this is obviously part of their culture. And if he really wants to be a good ambassador, that he should not just watch them, but maybe interact with them a little bit. But then he's transported into a childish game.
Right, right.
And he's forced to do childish things, which he kind of buys into. You know, when he's doing the thing that you sang at the top of the show, he's doing the thing where he, Dax just says the words as she's doing it, as she sort of jumps through the thing. But then Sisko takes it the next step and sings the actual tune, which I appreciated. That Sisko takes it 100% the whole time.
Well, if you're gonna commit to the bit, then
I guess it's true.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be electrocuted, so I guess I would do the same thing.
Yeah, considering two people already had been.
Yeah.
Not today.
Yeah.
So I want we're probably going to get to that, but just to speak to that really quick, like I wish that it had been written in a way where it was around, because they were saying it as around.
Out of step. That's right. Yeah. Right.
So it would have been kind of fun to actually hear it melodically, being actors who are actually fairly decent actors. They're not tone deaf, so they can sing, and so it would have been kind of fun to actually hear around instead of...
Well, even outside the musical aspect of how that would have been cool, don't start until I'm done, because you're just going to mess me up and you're going to make me electrocuted.
Right. It's so true.
Because they started 1.5 seconds after each other, and they're saying at different tempos, at different lines. It's just like, I'm surprised they didn't have to do this 5 or 6 times, but they figured out, let me finish, and then you can come.
Yeah. Well, and I guess even speaking to that, like, it would have been... Because they did all start on the top of the verses, but it was done in a weird way that we should have heard a la Moraine, a la Moraine, like...
Right. Yeah, it should have been directly on top of each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the Hawati catch Quark cheating.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems to be established that they're going to play a new game. And they're going to punish Quark by making him play this game.
Right.
So this is interesting, I suppose, because I think the reason I found it interesting was because of this actor guy. I thought that he played this so well.
Yeah. Well, you're right, because it's a ridiculous thing as a punishment, but he's playing it as very menacing and mysterious.
Right, and it may actually speak to the culture of the Hawati is like, oh, even their punishment, you're forced to play games you don't want to play.
Right.
So it's interesting, I guess. I guess they did a little bit of thinking about this. So anyway, they catch Quark cheating, and he says, well, what do you want to play? Do you guys like holosuites? I'll give you a free holosuite.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have sex? And I was thinking to myself, oh, this is the first time anybody has ever explicitly acknowledged what actually goes on in a holodeck 99% of the time, right?
I guess that's true. Right.
Yeah. Maybe the only time it's been acknowledged, because Quark is like, do you have sex?
Right.
No, this is the culmination of all of our technology. We've made it. You can have sex with anything or anyone that you want. So they all wake up in this game, and it appears at first glance to be sort of a first-person shooter from the 90s kind of game. Not in the sense that we see like a gun in the forefront of the frame and we're walking around first person, but the idea that there are doors and you have to go through doors into the next room to either to encounter your next challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt, I don't know if did you play those at all?
The PC ones or the arcade or what?
They were more PC based. One of them was like the first one was called Frankenweenie or something like that, where it was something Stein.
Wolfenstein?
Wolfenstein, yeah.
Okay.
There was that one, and then there was Marathon, and there was Doom, and there was Quake, and there was all these different ones and they were all kind of escalating in better graphics or whatever.
Yeah.
But they all felt like they were all constructed in that way where you're in a room, got to go to the next room to advance yourself through it. And so you go through a door.
Right.
And usually you're shooting people, but other things like Myst, you would go through a door and then there'd be a puzzle. You had to work out the puzzle. So it kind of felt like that. And that was sort of where games were at. Like Myst was like the number one game in the 90s, I think early 90s, for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so it felt like this was some sort of nod to that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I could just be superimposing that on top of this, but
Well, you absolutely are, but it is a good observation. So what happened was the person who wrote it had written for TNG for a while, and the way TNG worked actually apparently was they kind of reserved their budget for the first half of the season so they could spend it on the second half of the season. And so the writer of this, thinking, because the whole show takes place on a single set, like it should have been, they should have been saving all kinds of money. So he wrote a very elaborate script, and then when he brought in the script and they started looking at it, they were talking about how the set, which was going to be an outside village area, was far too expensive to build, and they were already over budget anyway. So they cut it back completely, and they made it into these hallway aspects of it. And while disappointed, he felt that it was the hallways were very game-like, but kind of Arthurian is what they described it as, and it was kind of more phantasmagorical. They wanted to use their $3 words.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't really peg them as Arthurian. I guess they had all of that symbology on the walls and stuff, and it kind of felt like there were great halls and that kind of thing.
Right.
But it felt more sci-fi than
I completely
Arthurian.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So they all wake up in this Arthurian, allegedly Arthurian environment.
Sisko fell asleep in his uniform?
I think so. I think he
with
goes
the
straight to bed.
tricorder?
I don't know. That's a good point. Okay, so let's get through this because these questions need answers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they all wake up and they realize that the four of them are four?
Yeah. The four of them are four, yep.
Yeah. And they all realize that. And we hear Bashir screaming.
Yes.
And it's like the worst acting ever. Like it was first take and he's never done it before. It stood out to me as very hammy. And I couldn't tell if it was on purpose because they make fun of it later. Because Sisko makes fun of him, or whoever does. Somebody makes fun of him.
So yes, that's what I took it as, because it wasn't screaming like I'm scared. It was screaming like I need to scream right now to wake up. And so I thought that too. Like when they first showed him, he's got his arms up against the wall and he's shaking his head back and forth screaming. But then when he explained, like, isn't this what you do to wake up out of, like, doesn't everybody do this? Like,
it just didn't read as authentic to me. It seemed like he was acting while he was acting. I thought there was going to be something more to Bashir being there because he was being so bad at it.
Gotcha. Okay. No, I took it as kind of what you're saying, but as like after he explained it, it was genuinely just a forced scream to try to get himself to wake up, and he was just doing it over and over, trying to get himself to wake up.
And so the four of them realize they're in some sort of weird construct that they don't know how to get out of, and that's the mystery. What's happening? And I don't know at this point. I did, but I don't know if you did. Put together the fact that this game that Quark is playing is what's happening with the crew team, or the command team.
Okay.
Did you?
Yes. I mean, partly because I remember the episode, but also I don't know, that might be the only reason. But I the moment the game was built and they were like, let's start, and then the four people were in this room, I knew that they had been taken by the Hawadi. But I also assumed, because like they had just started the game, that they were in the game somehow.
Right. It wasn't a coincidence that they just started the game and Sisko is magically transported into this game-like arena, I guess.
Right.
So, so Jake comes to see Odo because he can't find his dad, because they set up, they were supposed to have a talk and he didn't show up, etc. Already bored with that thing. And so what happens is Odo says he's not on the ship. We don't know what's happening. This is where the episode should have started. Jake comes to Odo. Where's my dad? Odo says, computer, where's Commander Sisko? Not on the ship. Okay, that's a problem.
Right.
So we got to get to the bottom of this. And then we show up at Quark's, and they're Quark's? Quark's and we see this game, him playing this game with these strange people. The whole fact that they're brand new to the Federation is immaterial to the episode.
Right.
So why have that aspect to it? Why can't they just be aliens that are visiting?
Well, I think because it was a little bit of show not tell. Like they wanted to kind of get the premise set up and not jump into the middle of it. But I agree. Like this is one of those things that could have been explained. Like this is one of those things. This is one of those rare times where telling instead of showing would have been more interesting, where they're trying to establish what happened and they're having a conversation. It's kind of what happens in the Ready Room. There's a lot of telling instead of showing, but they've already had the action, and so now we want to know.
Yeah, it's a good mystery as to what's happening. And we wouldn't immediately connect the game with what happened to Ben Sisko.
No, not at all.
And the rest of them. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a better mystery. It's a better constructed mystery than having all this fat at the beginning that we don't need.
Right.
You could very easily establish in a 30-second flashback kind of thing where Quark is relating what's happened.
Right.
And it would be fine. And normally you don't want to rely on flashbacks like that, but this could have been fun. It would be like a flashback montage.
You don't need to see the action of it. Like Quark can just tell Odo and the audience, like they could even have a pull aside of the two, Fallow and Quark, and kind of explaining what happened. And Fallow saying that he cheated and now he has to pay the price and we're playing this new game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been more in the show don't tell idea that you could have, instead of having just Quark talk for 30 seconds, why not show it? In a montage. It would have been more interesting visually, I think. I always prefer the montage, the flashback montage to someone just telling me what happened. Because that would have been a lot of information for Quark to relay. But I don't know. Regardless, they didn't do it, so it doesn't matter. But I would have preferred the episode started here. Way more interesting.
Yeah, way more interesting.
Yeah, and then Odo does some investigating and somehow he puts together when he sees the pieces without knowing anything. Mm-hmm. He sees Quark
playing this game.
He's like, oh, there must be something going on between these two. Like, why would you ever put that together? Uh-huh. Knowing nothing, knowing zero. Uh-huh. He just like, there's no way. Even someone as smart as Janeway. I mean, Odo.
Well, Janeway's not there. That's why they didn't figure it out. It's too bad we can't
solve this.
They did figure it out. So yeah, that must have. Ooh.
Oh.
What if? Oh no, they overlapped way too much. I was gonna say, what if Janeway was Odo in disguise?
Or what if Janeway? You mean on the ship?
Yeah, like
on Voyager.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well,
no, it doesn't work because the episodes overlap far too much.
Well, and it would explain why she's so over it all the time.
Right.
It was a practical joke at the beginning of Voyager. He's like, oh well, now I kind of have to be Janeway for the rest of the show. I want to watch that show. Like, if you could do a Lower Decks version of that, where you see him in a pail every night, go as Janeway going into his pail,
right?
And then coming out and having to hide, just showing all of these big events that happen in Voyager's 7-year journey. That he's actually been Odo the whole time. That's brilliant.
But yeah, so Quark was the one who figured it out. He says 4 officers went missing. He's like, no, I can't be considered. Did you say 4? And Odo then looks at the board and he's like, Quark.
It did turn into an 80s sitcom for a second.
Right.
Yeah. There's just no way.
Right. There's no way you would piece that together that fast.
No.
Like you may get there eventually. Like, when did you start playing this game? That's the same time that they disappeared. So somehow.
Yeah, show some investigation.
Right.
Trim the fat at the beginning and let Odo be Odo for a while.
Yeah.
As opposed to him just standing there watching Quark play the game.
Right.
And that's kind of happens. We kind of get a little bit of him investigating, and then he says, okay, in this conversation, oh my God, I couldn't believe it happened. So Odo wants to go investigate the Hawati ship.
Uh-huh.
And he says to the Chief O'Brien at the time, the Chief O'Brien, not that Chief O'Brien.
The faux Brian?
Yeah. Oh, nice. Chief Faux'Brien. That's amazing. You did it.
Anyway, what does he say? Say it.
So he says, I want to go over there. And they're like, you can't do that. That's a huge violation of like all of our first contact protocols. And he's like, is it against Starfleet policy to press a few buttons?
Well, no, and I love, he's like, oh, what? It is? Good thing I'm not Starfleet.
Yeah. Well, he's right. He's not in Starfleet.
Right.
But I have a feeling that he follows the Starfleet rules.
Well, he
right?
eventually
Otherwise-
does get accepted into Starfleet, but he wasn't yet.
But he wasn't yet. But to answer your question, is it against Starfleet policy to press a few buttons? Yeah. I could fire with a few buttons. I could fire a few torpedoes and kill an entire fleet of Federation Starfleet. Right. So yes, yeah. It depends on which buttons.
Right.
But to answer your question, in this scenario, yes, definitely against Starfleet policy to press these buttons that will transport you over to their ship. Breaking, it's not just the buttons.
Right. I'm abetting a violation of Starfleet policy. Yeah.
I mean, it's just bad writing, right?
Right.
That should not have been what he said.
Right.
There should have been another clever Odoism that got him around this thing.
Right. There's a way that you can set up the delay in the transporter, and several people have done it. So, he easily could have just, like, I can't do that, and get out of my way, and just push the buttons himself.
Yeah, so something happens then. And so Odo gets beamed somewhere. And I guess I wasn't paying enough attention. Where does he get beamed? Because he just shows up at Quark's somehow?
Yeah, well, so...
What happened?
Right. The way I took that was kind of their security measures. So he beams onto the ship. He opens the door. There's a blinding light. He can't see in there, but he goes in anyway, and he walks into Quark's. And then Fallow gives him kind of a knowing expression like, you tried to get in our ship, didn't you? And so I took that to be kind of what happened. Like if anybody tried to get on their ship to find out where the crew were, they would just get science fictionally transported.
Yeah, and they didn't really go into it, which is what makes the science fiction a little weak.
Uh-huh.
But they didn't go into how they were able to beam these people, four command people, out of their beds and into another ship without anybody knowing, without setting off any alarms.
Well, and without there being any record of the transportation either, because
Yeah.
they just disappeared off the ship and the computer didn't know where they were.
Well, and I'm guessing that the transport was initiated from their ship and not from the station. But there should have been some sort of alarm saying, "Hey, you're not supposed to use transporters like that."
Right.
So why is this happening? And they never go into why that happened, or if this is something they normally do. The Hawadi like this is the perfect kidnapping technology because you can effectively kidnap somebody. They could have just jetted off into the wormhole,
right,
and been gone.
Exactly,
you wouldn't have known it. It almost has a demerit for that because they don't go into it. They don't go. I guess that's not the point of the episode, but it is a science fiction show,
right? Well, and it's happened a couple times in other episodes where we have deemed it a proper episode or not a proper episode because they provided or didn't provide the scientific explanation of it.
Yeah.
And so for me, because there is no scientific explanation for how they get science fictionally transported into the game.
Yeah. I think so let's get through the episode. We'll discuss after the episode. Okay. So they jump back and forth between Odo investigating.
See, and we will because we've now referenced it twice. So we will have some resolution to that. Sorry, go ahead.
But will we?
We should just leave it. All right, let's see what we're watching next.
Yeah. Well, it happens all the time on this show. So they jump back and forth between the team inside the game having to solve all of these fairly easy puzzles.
Yeah.
They're not like great puzzles.
That was the part that I was most disappointed by. Like, I feel like the puzzles should have been far more intricate, and they just weren't.
I agree. And it wasn't clear if Quark had any, if he was doing anything, or rather he was just deciding which door for the characters to go through.
Right.
Like there was this very elaborate setup with this game that just materializes out of nowhere when they start playing it.
Uh-huh.
And it's unclear because the players in the game, Cisco and et al., they seem to have autonomy of what happens. Like Bashir decides to drink the drink that lets them breathe oxygen again, which is sort of a dumb thing.
Yep.
And the whole hopscotch thing. They figure that out themselves. So what is Quark doing? Is he just deciding their fate of which door for them to go through? Because I guess that is. I guess they're just deciding which door. But how is Quark participating in this game?
Well, I think that's what it was. Like exactly what you said. Do the shorter, more perilous, or the longer but safer route. And maybe that's why. Maybe that's why the games were so easy because he picked the easier one every time, except for the end when he said, like the shorter, faster, more dangerous way is the right thing to choose, and that was where they were in the cliffs, in the chasm.
Right. I guess you're right. I mean, it's just it was. I don't know. You're right. I wish there was more of a link between what Quark was doing and what the team was doing. That there was some sort of connection, because it didn't seem like they would roll these dice. There were more of them. Yep. They would roll the dice, and then they would cut back to Commander Sisko doing something. I don't know. It felt very unthought out.
Like the first one should have been the Alamarine. I feel like, that was kind of a simple introduction. Like, here's how the game works. The second one should have been something that was more of a puzzle that they couldn't figure out until Quark did something and something appeared in the game, or like something on the wall. Yeah. So it's just something appeared in that room that gave them an extra bit of information to help them figure out whatever the puzzle was.
Oh, that's be a good idea. Or an object that allows them to do something. Yeah. Make it like a game.
Yeah.
As opposed to just they walk into a room, everybody's laughing, and they start choking on gas, and so they have to drink the drink. There's not even any logic to the game.
Right. Well, and he says, he's like, I just guessed.
Yeah. There was no intellectualism at all.
Yeah.
And so they keep doing this. And so this whole thing culminates in this weird rocky terrain that they go into, the Commander Sisko. And they're having to rock climb. And I would say at least 5 or 6 minutes, maybe more, is them just rock climbing. Nothing is happening. There's no stakes necessarily. I mean, yes, we think they're going to die if they trip and fall.
Well, and
but
there's
that's
the earthquakes, yeah.
And the camera shake was just ridiculous. Like, it's like if the Earth were shaking as much as the camera is shaking right now, they would just be a bloody pulp on the ground.
Well, they'd be bounced around like those hockey games from the 80s.
You mean like the Nintendo thing, like that kind of thing?
No, like
what hockey games?
Or the hockey or the soccer games where it was the field and you put all the players on there, and then you just started it, and the whole ground shook, and your players like vibrated around. And you had to, like...
yeah, exactly. Like they would all just be dead. Like, why does it just shake so much? Anyway, it's just I was bored watching them just rock climb, and they were trying to help Dax because she had a hurt leg or something like that, and it just felt like, okay. Why can't we be doing science fiction-y things now?
Going back to the game, I feel like there should have been 4 games that they had to figure out. They could definitely shorten down the cliff one, keep the Alamarine one, kind of redo the song, then have 2 other games. One where the puzzle is either impossible to figure out or almost impossible until Quark rolls the dice and gives them that extra piece to help them solve it. And another room where he rolls the dice in a negative fashion and something else happens, like the clock gets cut in half, or they do have to sacrifice one of the players. That's where Bashir should have been lost, in a game where he actually rolls a poor roll. Well,
or how about have it be about cheating? Because the whole thing is that the Hawadi are trying to teach Quark a lesson. And so make it about the what has to happen at the end is that you can't cheat or you have to cheat, something along those lines. So it at least has some cohesion plot wise.
Right.
Because it doesn't. It doesn't.
Right.
It just, they get to the end, they're like, oh, wait a minute, we were never in peril at all? That's right. But I do wonder, it does beg the question about this game that apparently, I would argue, based on the way that they like to play it, all the pomp and circumstance that the Hawadi gave when playing this game is that it's their favorite game. How do you play this game when there aren't any stakes? Because I felt like if you know that the people inside the game aren't going to perish based on what you say, it's not really very fun, I guess. I guess that's all games, maybe. But if you were just a regular Hawadi who loves to play this game every Saturday with the grandparents, I like the idea that the grandparents are the ones that go into the game.
Right.
But I mean, it could be a fun escape room type of adventure, I suppose, but not where you get electrocuted and asphyxiated. I mean, is that what happens in this game? And when you know that it's coming, don't you kind of like dread going into being the one that goes into the game?
So I took it as more of a punishment game, kind of what you were saying. And so it's almost like the consequences for breaking the rules, and you get stuck into this game, and maybe it's a gamble, or maybe like you never know what the consequence will be. Like, you're not allowed to talk about it, or depending on the severity of what your action was, then you get put into this game that you've never seen before, and you genuinely think your life is on the line. and you have that moment, and like when you're out of it, they're like, the next time you won't survive, or something like that.
Yeah, I can't imagine them killing people though. Maybe they do. Maybe that's part of the culture. Their games are set up that way, but
Right.
they don't kill anybody in this part, right? They don't kill like if you're never in peril.
Well, and I'm saying
which
like,
Quark didn't know.
right, but it was his first offense, and it was an alien race that they were trying to be in good graces with. So it was kind of a like, we're going to let you live because we want to stick around for a while. We don't want to have a war with you guys.
Well, speaking of which, so there's this very odd scene where the Hawadi make Quark choose who is going to perish. One of the characters has to perish.
Mm-hmm.
You have to choose who it is. And then there is this very long scene where Quark is begging to not have to do this. And it's super overdramatic and not appropriate for this episode. Mm-hmm. Did you notice this? Where he's screaming.
Oh,
to
yeah.
Not
Yeah, and his like just pleading of saying please over and over again. Yeah.
And I was like, oh God, this is like something out of a World War II epic, not
right.
a fun science fiction show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just felt very out of place, and I was wondering, did we miss something? Because it's so overdramatic, and he's screaming. He's screaming at these people, and the guy's like, all right, you don't have to choose. And I guess maybe he felt bad because like, oh, he doesn't know this is not real. Right?
Well, you're kind of having a pretty extreme reaction right now. Like,
chill, bro.
Right? We're getting rid of one of your players. Like, it's fine.
Remind me not to play chess with this guy.
Right. Don't take the pawn, please.
No, he doesn't know. He's just an innocent man.
But yeah, and to have such an emotional reaction, and then for him to almost flippantly and annoyedly be like, "Fine, you don't have to pick. We'll just let the computer do it." Like,
I was like, yeah, well, I think that Quark, his sympathy and empathy is only limited, but he does have some. So the idea that he would be forced to choose who dies is unacceptable to him.
Right.
It's okay if somebody else does it, though.
Right.
Right. He has morals, but they're not a lot of morals.
Well, yeah, like we saw that with whatever that episode was.
Yeah.
Where he was selling the weapons. He was fine with the death when he wasn't involved, or when it was just shooting. But then when it was full on genocide, that was where he took issue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, which I like that. It's consistent, I suppose.
Yeah.
Anyway, we get to the end of the episode, and nothing has really happened, and it just kind of ends.
Yep.
And we never get to see the talk between Jake and Ben Sisko about girls.
Well, so here's what's kind of funny. So this episode took place at about the same time as Birthright on TNG, and so it was supposed to be a crossover episode. Well, it was a crossover episode. And Terry Farrell, Dax, actually was the crew member chosen to do the scenes in the crossover, and because she was filming this episode, she couldn't go, and instead they chose Bashir because he was killed off early. And I don't know if she's still salty about it, but she was pretty upset for a while. She's like, they killed him off, or because he was killed off, he was allowed to do the show and I couldn't, but there was no reason why it had to be him who was killed off and I had to stay. Like, they could have just switched the characters who died and who hurt their leg.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that she would want to be on the show that much. Maybe, I guess it wasn't a more interesting show.
Right. And I vaguely remember the episode. I just, reading that, I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of remember Bashir being on TNG at one point.
I don't at all. That's crazy.
So it just makes me wonder, like, how important it was, like how they had to rewrite the episode for it to be Bashir, or how different it would have been if Dax had been on there. Like, would they have said, wow, Trill looked different?
I would have preferred Odo to be on Next Gen if I was going to choose somebody,
Odo and Data would have been a really interesting combination to see.
Yeah, I guess they don't really share jobs, I guess.
No, yeah.
But, so they're the most interesting, unexpected or unpredictable characters.
Right.
You never know what Data's going to do, and you never really know what Odo's going to do.
Right. Well, yeah, like as chiefs of security, it would have been really interesting to see like how Odo and Worf interacted with each other. It's a shame we never got that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Although you can do Odo in a lot of fun different ways, though, because he can shapeshift.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. But they didn't do that.
Right.
So the end of the show happens, and I feel like I was left disappointed once again. But I will say, I think it is a proper Star Trek episode. And I agree with what you're saying, that they don't really go into the science fiction of how things are transported and how it works. But that, to me, wasn't the science fiction. To me, the science fiction was more the differences of the races and the implication, I guess. I guess I get into this problem with Voyager 2, where the potential of the idea sort of takes over and not the actual execution. So I liked the Hawaii.
I have to argue that the different cultures does not make it science fiction.
Yeah, you're right. It's not intrinsically science fiction, only in that it is an alien race that seems to have technology surrounding this game playing. I got the impression that this advanced ability to beam people out and beam people like we're at random and on demand.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to they seem to have developed this for game playing, and who knows how many other races they trick into cheating so they can do this game for them.
Right.
But I do like that kind of, I liked that part. It was very interesting to see them haggle and all that stuff. But I guess you're right. I guess that's not actually science fiction.
Well, yeah, like it's great that you liked it, but it's not science fiction. It's just anthropology.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess it's not a proper episode.
Yeah. I mean, yes, there's the culture difference, which, like you said, is interesting. But on the sci-fi element of things, there just wasn't anything. There wasn't enough sci-fi in it. Like, I kept having to say science fictionally transported because it was never explained, and they were just magically appearing in these places.
No, you're right. I should say I didn't really like this episode. I liked little pockets of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And I guess that's part of the difference between this episode and like a TNG episode. In addition to being stuck in the game, they would have been trying to figure out a way to get them out. And in this episode, the only way they got them out was by finishing the game.
You could argue that the Next Gen episode would have eventually led to that. They would have figured that out after trying very hard to technologically extract them from this game.
Right.
But they didn't do that in Deep Space Nine. All they did was have Odo stand there and blow on dice.
Right.
And it just felt half-baked.
Yeah.
The whole episode. So I guess you're right. Not proper. Did you like the episode?
I'm going to say no. No. I think when all is said and done, like it was too half-baked, and there wasn't, the solutions to the puzzles were too fast. That I don't think that it was captivating enough to say that yes, I enjoyed it. So I'm going to say, it's not proper and I didn't like it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Disappointed again by Deep Space Nine episode.
So are you saying no for you too?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be hard for me to get a yes out of you when I'm sitting on a no.
Yeah. All right, let's see what we're watching next.
Okay. Data Lore, episode 12 of season 1 of Next Generation. Star Trek, The Next Generation.
Oh, okay.
The blurb says, the Enterprise visits the planet where Data was created and discovers another android just like him. But the two brothers have crucial differences.
Yeah, dude, spoilers. Spoiled the whole thing.
Really?
I can't imagine that that just by the name only, that if you were walking into this not knowing what's going to happen, it would be a good surprise to know that Data has a brother.
I have to believe that it's in the cold open.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll have to find out.
Yeah. I would imagine the episode starts with them beaming onto the planet. Like, it starts with Picard setting up the premise, how they are at the planet where Data was first discovered, and they beam down to Nunyan Sung's house, lab, and they find...
House lab.
they find the head of Lore, and they start building it. That's what I would guess.
Okay, well, I guess we'll have to find out.
Yeah, only one way to do that. Well,
and
nope.
that's
Again, there are many ways, but the way we do it is let's go watch it.
I've been Paul.
And I've been Jonathan. And this has been The Measure of an Episode.
Yep, that's our outro from now on. From now on.